So what do you actually use gil for in Final Fantasy's Endgame anyway? G'day, ZiggyD here, and that was a question that was sent to me, and since I'm currently not at Endgame myself, I instead set out to talk to a bunch of people who are at Endgame and to do a bunch of research and try and answer this question to the best of my abilities. So let's jump straight into it. Now, what gil is actually used for is divided into three categories, or at least I'll be dividing it into three categories for this particular video. First up is the running costs, and this is probably actually the main thing that your gil will be going towards in the long run. Now, first up, there is gear repairs. Every couple of dungeons, your gear you're gonna notice that it's starting to deteriorate, starting to get quite damaged, and the repair costs can, they can equal a couple of thousand gil at endgame essentially. And this will, if you're running low on gil, this will eat into you pretty hard. And if you do happen to run out of gil and all your gear is broken, then you're gonna have some trouble continuing on with endgame content. So that is something you definitely need gil for. Next up is teleporting. Even while you're leveling, you've probably already noticed that teleporting is pretty expensive in this game. Now, you do have some cheaper ways of getting around, such as chocobo porters, airships, there's actual normal boats, and you can use your own chocobo or various other sorts of mounts. But oftentimes, when you're teleporting between city to city for quests, you're going to start eating into your gil, and this will cost a bit of money. You're going to need some reserves set aside for this purpose as well. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a lot of running around. Next up is potions and food. Now, these any consumables in general, but mainly potions and food. Potions themselves aren't too expensive, but food, at endgame, you'll be wanting the best food available to take with you into dungeons, and most of this food will actually be bought from people who have taken up the culinarian actual crafting class. So you're going to be, contacting level 50 culinarians, or you're going to be searching the market board and buying endgame powerful food of this. And this is actually pretty important to do as well. It's not something you should neglect, because if you don't have, the well-fed buff from a good piece of high-level food, a good meal, if you don't have a full belly going into a dungeon, you're essentially going into those dungeons missing a piece of gear, because that's the equivalent of the stats that they'll end up giving you, pretty much. Next up, we have the next category of gearing costs, basically. Now, you will be able to acquire most gear through either your Grand Company seals or through dungeons, and you won't need to buy too much gear just to start getting into endgame. You can search the market board for some pieces if you happen to be missing any pieces, just to get you into those endgame pieces of content. But overall, you won't need to buy too much of that. However, what you will have to do is pay other crafters to meld material to your gear. Now, this entire guide, I assume that you guys aren't leveling or focusing on your crafting classes yet, or you don't have all of the crafting classes you need. If you are getting into crafting a lot yourself, then this will be a little bit different story, and the gil will be used by you in a different way. But overall, people who are just focusing on their combat classes will need to pay those high-level crafters to meld materia to their gear for them. You can create your own materia, but to actually meld it to your gear, you need to pay a crafter, and there's actually a system in place for doing that as well that makes it a bit easier, but this will probably cost you a little bit of gil. And then next up in the gearing costs department, you will be buying artifact job armor precursor items. So if you are a bard and you're level 45 to 50, and you'll be wanting your artifact armor, and to do that you need a few precursor pieces of gear, and you might have to pay a little bit for these. Now, someone said that to get the precursor for their artifact weapon, it was something like 70k gil, so this can be pretty expensive as well, it seems, but a lot of the armor pieces should be pretty cheap overall, but that is something you will need quite a bit of gil for as you start moving into endgame if you want to get that powerful artifact gear, and you will, to be able to progress in the game a little bit further at endgame. And then finally, the final category I put into the upcoming gil things that you can use your gil on, essentially, and that is buying a house when the next major patch comes out. Housing has been announced, and you'll probably, I imagine most people will be wanting to get their very own house for their character in Final Fantasy XIV. There's a lot of attachment you have to that one character, so getting a house, is a pretty good idea, but this will be pretty expensive. It's been said to cost the equivalent of the earnings you would make by leveling up 2 classes to level 50 from quests. So essentially, quite a bit of money. it could be like a couple 100,000 gil or something, it seems. So it will be pretty expensive. Maybe like 500,000 gil, maybe a couple, 250,000 gil or something like that. I don't know the exact amounts, but it will be a fairly significant chunk of gil. So if you're doing all of those other previous things I've mentioned, and you're still trying to save up your gil, that will be one thing you'll be saving up your gil for. So overall, not that much actually. There's not that actually much to use for gil. Like a lot of MMOs these days, there's a lot of different currency types. You've got your seals, and then you've got different endgame types of currency that you get from defeating certain bosses and doing certain dungeons. And you'll be using those to get most of the gear and things you need. But gil, can be used on the market board if you want to start getting into a bit of buying and selling, flipping items and things like that. And, for all of those previous things I mentioned. But overall, gil isn't the be-all and end-all. But if you do want to save up some stuff, that should give you a good idea of what you actually want to save up for. So, with that in mind, what are some of the basic ways that you can actually earn gil? Now, firstly, I want to say that since you'll likely be spending your leave allowances on your Grand Company leaves to earn those Grand Company seals and to actually get that Grand Company armor and gear and stuff, spending your leave allowance on your normal leaves to earn gil probably won't actually be a viable option. However, if you have all the Grand Company stuff you need and you do need to make some gil, doing some normal leaves is an option. It is an option, but one that I don't think too many people will utilize. But what are some actual ways that will be effective? Firstly, questing and selecting the Allegan rewards while you're leveling is pretty viable, and you can even go back and do some of the probably higher level quests to get those rewards. I think someone said they ended up with a couple 100k of gil after just selecting the Allegan rewards and doing a good amount of the quest. So you can make quite a bit of gil through doing that, and that'll be your primary source of gil while you're leveling especially. Fates will earn you some gil, but in general they tend to not earn that much. Even like at an early game you get like a couple gil for doing a fate, and it's not that much better at end game, so you'll get a bit of gil that way, but not too much, and most likely you'll be doing a lot of fates, so it'll add up a little bit, but it probably won't cover your repair costs, I imagine. Next up, dungeons will earn you a small amount as well, but same sort of deal as fates, not that much in general, and you'll be paying for repair costs to actually do those dungeons. Crafting and selling higher end items and consumables, however, will be quite a viable way of making gil. There's currently a lot of things on the market board that are worth quite a bit of gil. A lot of people want to buy them and need to buy them, and crafters can make them with the actual resources to make them being quite cheap. The only drawback to that, of course, is you actually need to level those crafting classes to get there, and a lot of these ones that are worth quite a bit are, at sort of endgame crafting, level 40 to 50, although there are a few things you can make a bit of money on while leveling as well. But in general, you're going to need to put a lot of time in if you want to make gil that way, and I imagine quite a good proportion of the population will go that route. And then, of course, finally, you can make gil just by playing around with the market board, by flipping items and just sensing and finding whatever opportunities you can to make gil. The same sort of thing in any sort of MMO that has an economy that involves trading in an auction house sort of situation. All of the same rules apply there in terms of how you can make your money. But overall, not too many things that you need gil for, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you actually do need it for, and some ideas of how to go about making it. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.